Pesach is a real busy season. There's so much to do, especially this year when Pesach falls out on the day after Shabbos. So that means Erev Pesach is Shabbos. There's so many new laws to know about. Getting rid of the chametz. How do you get rid of it on Shabbos? Usually you burn the chametz in the morning, and then you're done with chametz. This year you burn the chametz on Friday morning, and you still keep it for Shabbos. A lot of details to know. In addition to the regular laws multiple laws of Pesach, there's the extra laws. But as we prepare for Pesach, in addition to the halachic preparation and knowing all the body of how to do Pesach, there's also the avodah of Pesach, the work of Pesach. So when Pesach comes along, it isn't just about reading a Haggadah, making a Seder, getting the matzah, getting the chametz. That's all the framework, the halacha. That's all the body. And that's obviously the fundamental of Judaism, is the body of Judaism, the halacha. But then there is the avodah, the spiritual soul. The transformation is supposed to take place inside each and every one of us. And what I want to do is discuss how that pertains in general to every year, and then specifically what the difference is this year when Erev Pesach, the day before Pesach, falls out on Shabbos. So Pesach in general is Yetzias Mitzrayim. Pesach is the day we went out of Egypt. We were slaves to Pharaoh, and then we got out of Mitzrayim and we became a nation. Pesach every year calls upon us to escape the limitations that the world places upon us and become a nation of God. And what that means is, Mitzrayim means limitations. Mitzrayim, the word Mitzrayim, Egypt, is universal in its use in Torah. We do so many things, Zecher Litzias Mitzrayim, to remember the Exodus from Egypt. It isn't just about having become a nation so many years ago in the year 2448 from creation. More than that, it's about our ability to become a nation now. So we're pulled down, we're bogged down by many types of constraints and limitations upon us. For example, when a person is stuck in any kind of addictions or any kind of depressions or other anxieties that limit a person. So and they could be, by the way, internal, inside you, or external things that are going on outside, Pesach is a time to be able to escape, to rise above those limitations. What's the process? How do you rise above those limitations? You do it through eating matzah, and then through meditating on your relationship with God. So you start thinking about what it means to be the people of God. A human being is locked up into a certain narrative. That narrative is, well, I belong to this world, everyone's trying to be successful in the rat race, and I'm trying to get through that rat race, and that usually causes all the unfinished business, the lack of ability to carry out what I consider to be success. And in that disparity is where a person feels all the midos, the emotions, gone wrong. That's in general Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's the ability to view things the way God views them. So when I go out of my own Mitzrayim through meditating on God. So if I meditate, I say, you know what, look, God is eternal. And I start realizing that this God chose me and my neshama, my soul. And He lifted me from all other people in this world, and He made me into a Jew. And as a Jew, that gives me a uniqueness and a calling. It makes me godly, divine. So everybody else is locked into the rat race, locked into what this world locks them into. And I have that freedom. This is the Zman Cheruseinu, the festival of our freedom. As you meditate on what that means, that we transcend mortality by being a part of God. That thought itself, and the more you meditate and reflect on it, the more it allows us to escape Mitzrayim. That's what the Haggadah is about. It's about sitting down. Haggadah means to tell. Haggadah also means to channel. So you channel the power of the divine into you by the meditation of what it means to be a people. That's in general. That's how we do every year when it comes to Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's not just every year, it's every day. You're supposed to look at yourself every day as if you're escaping Mitzrayim. So when we sit down to the Seder, it's that once a year event that we focus on it intently. And we're not focusing on only on this time when we became a people so many years ago, but rather on how it applies to us today. And what it means that I can escape my limitations through my realization of the divine. Just like in Mitzrayim, they were able to escape Mitzrayim when they had that connection with God. Now, in order to escape Mitzrayim, what you want to have is the process of how they got out. If we look at the story, so we tell the Haggadah, and in the Haggadah we read the story of how they got out. And what happened was, God appeared to Moshe. Moshe came and told the people that on the first night, on the night of the Seder, you're going to eat a lamb. And that lamb has to be slaughtered on the day before Pesach. And that lamb, at least the first year, had to be tied to a bed for 4 days before. The significance of tying it to a bed was the lamb was the god of the Egyptians, and the Jew had to slaughter the god of the Egyptians, but not slaughter it in one fell swoop, but rather spend 4 days contemplating, meditating, marinating in this idea that he was going to escape the god of the Egyptians. So the more you think about it, it's not just about a fleeting thought, oh, I'm a part of God's people. It's a matter of contemplating every day. We do this in davening. We actually meditate that Shema Yisroel, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, that Hashem is one. And the more I internalize that God is one, and then He chose me as a people, the more it puts me into perspective and allows me to experience the oneness of God out there and to look at life a little bit differently. Tying the Korban Pesach was the God of the Egyptians was the ultimate. So in our lives, as many gods that we've placed upon us, those are the limitations that are around there. And as we ponder the existence of God in our lives and our connection to Him, and we marinate in it for days before, that's all the preparation for Pesach, that allows us to escape our limitations. And as we tell the story of the Haggadah, we're channeling down this power of the divine. So that's general what Pesach is every year. But now Pesach, the Korban Pesach at least, could either be on a weekday or on Shabbos. Actually, it's much more likely to be on a weekday, not 6 times more likely, but 3 times more likely, because there's actually 3 days a week where Pesach cannot fall on. The first day of Pesach can never be Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, which means that the day before Pesach cannot be Sunday, Tuesday, or Thursday. But it could be the other 3 days a week, and it could be on Shabbos. So, I just saw the statistics. I think in the 20th century, the Pesach only came out 8 times over the course of the entire 100 years. On Shabbos, Erev Pesach was only 8 times. So it's a very rare occasion. And this year, Pesach falls out on Sunday, which means the day before Pesach is Shabbos. Technically, we call it Erev Pesach is on Shabbos, but actually the Pesach is on Shabbos, because Pesach means the korban, the sacrifice, this lamb that was slaughtered. We only tied it to a bed the first time in Egypt, but every other time in history we slaughtered the Korban Pesach in the Beis HaMikdash. All the Jews gathered together on the day before Pesach in the afternoon in the Beis HaMikdash, and you had to have the entire Jewish people slaughtering the Korban Pesach and then eating it at night. And they had to all be finished, the Korban Pesach. That was the core of the Seder. That's the one element that's missing in our Seder today, that roast lamb. So they all gathered together, and they had you had to sign up, and then they would shech, they would slaughter the korban. One guy would slaughter it. You had to have people signed up, because every person had to eat at least a kazais, the size of an olive, a nice amount of meat, and you couldn't have any more meat left. So you all have to get together to get a Seder going, so that by the time midnight strikes, you finish the Korban Pesach. We do the Seder today without the lamb. We eat an afikoman instead, to remind us of the lamb, which we will get again when the Beis HaMikdash comes about. But you know, even though we don't have the actual korban, the actual sacrifice, the lamb, we do have an ability to delve into the Torah of the lamb and understand the Korban Pesach in its spiritual significance, and that allows us to live the Korban Pesach and understand what it's about. So there's the regular year when the Korban Pesach, the sacrifice, is offered on a weekday. And then there's the special year when it's offered on Shabbos. What is the significance of the Korban Pesach? So the word Pesach actually means Passover. Is correct. Hashem Pasach, He jumped over the Jewish homes. In the context of the story, the Jewish people took the blood of the lamb and they smeared the blood on the doorpost, on the lintel, and then in the middle of the night, when the Makas B'charis, the smiting of the firstborn, transpired, so God knew, so to speak, every Jewish home by the blood on the doorpost. And this way he was able to jump over the Jewish homes and not affect the Jewish homes. So the word Pesach is that jumping over. And what this Pesach signifies is our ability to jump over, to escape, to have an overhaul of all our ideas of the narrative of life that we have and be able to experience a complete Yetzias Mitzrayim, getting out of your limitations, is expressed through a Korban Pesach. Just like in Egypt, they tied this carbon, this lamb, the god of the Egyptians, to the bed, and they had to ponder this idea of how you escape Mitzrayim. That's how we all escape our limitations, by seeing life in a whole new light, by seeing things in a completely new perspective. The godly, divine perspective is what gets us out. Ultimately, when a Jew thinks about God and he starts realizing the oneness of God, the more you internalize that, the more you get out of all the mundanities of the world, which ultimately lead to stupidities. It's like we say in Kaparis, when we offer the chicken before Yom Kippur. So the verse says over there, Evilim, miderech pisham ume'avoneseim yis'anu. You wayward people, escape from not from your sin. We don't talk about sin. People don't sin. We talk about the path that leads to negativity. The path that leads to negativity is people don't fall. What happens to us is we develop a perspective, a narrative of life, and we get stuck in that perspective, and as a result of that, we do dumb things. So it's not the actual addiction, it's the thought of what is success in life, what is considered goodness in life. And when a person has God at his core, when he realizes that there's a creator, and the creator is one, and actually nothing exists. And Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, this truth of God is the reality that's really, that the world belies the true reality behind it. And as we meditate on that more and more, we escape our limitations. It's a process. It's a lifetime process, because we humans live a lie of Olam Hazeh, of this world. And as we allow ourselves to rise above it, a little inkling. When you eat the matzah, you get a little inkling of emunah. And that emunah says, hey, you're a Jew, and you have great aspirations, and there's a lot more to it. So when you offer the Korban Pesach on a weekday, it means you're experiencing the jump, this overhaul of perspective, insofar as it relates to mundane weekday events. So a person may be lost into addictions, and those are just crass and sometimes ugly places, deep dark places to be in. And you know it's wrong and you don't know how to escape it, but it's very clear that there needs to be a jump and an overhaul. That's what it means to offer the Korban Pesach on a weekday. To be able to sacrifice the Korban Pesach on Shabbos is a whole different world. Shabbos is a different experience. How do you actually celebrate Shabbos? What does it mean? Shabbos comes in. So we know when Shabbos comes in, there's 39 categories of work that are forbidden on Shabbos. That's what you do not do on Shabbos. So what do you do when Shabbos comes in? Shabbos, Rashi tells us from the Mechilta, which is a work of the sages, that on Shabbos you feel kol melachtecha asuya. Shabbos, a person wants to feel that all your work is done. When Shabbos comes in, it means I feel the pleasure of existence. So during the weekday, I'm working to go achieve stuff outside. On Shabbos, it's an inward pleasure. Oynik Shabbos. On Shabbos, I go back into my inner self, and I just experience that bliss of relationship with God. On Shabbos, a person, one who wants to make $100 million, looks at himself inside and says, I have the $100 million. I want to go out and I want to have a beautiful family. I want to find a shidduch. I want to find my bashert, my life's partner. Pretend I found that person. I found him or her. I got what I wanted. I'm not looking for stuff. I'm not looking for stuff outside. That's how you celebrate Shabbos. You celebrate Shabbos by just being and just existing. Shabbos is that relationship we have with God. On a deeper level, I don't need the $100 million. My relationship with God in itself is sufficient to just be. So when you speak about Shabbos, it's the ability to be present in my relationship with God. When Shabbos comes in, I don't feel like I need anything exterior. To say that on Shabbos you should offer a Korban Pesach is a total stira, a total contradiction. Korban Pesach means to jump to have a total different perspective, an overhaul of my entire narrative and my thinking of life. But if Shabbos means to be present and to just be myself and forget about all the other external things that I need, isn't that a contradiction to having a jump and an overhaul in my thinking? The first year in Egypt, the Korban Pesach was offered on a weekday. It was actually a Wednesday. That's because the Torah was given, according to most opinions, on Shabbos. And therefore, if you count 49 days, which they were counting before, you will arrive at, they started counting on the second day of Pesach. The second day of Pesach would be Friday, because the 50th day would be the day of Matan Torah. It would be a Friday. So the first day of Pesach would be a Thursday, which means the day before Pesach would be a Wednesday. So it's a weekday. The first day was a weekday. And that's significant because in Mitzrayim, the goal was to escape all the negativity of Egypt, especially since there were many Erev, there were actually non-Jews, Egyptians, who converted and went out together with the Jews. The Jews were running away from idolatry and they were escaping into a whole new reality. That's in Mitzrayim. The second year, when they got out of Egypt, actually, the Korban Pesach was offered, it would seem, on a Shabbos. And that's because the second year, they dedicated the Mishkan, Bayi Bayim Hashmini. It says the Mishkan was dedicated on Sunday, the rabbis tell us. And that was the first day of Nissan. That would mean that the 15th day of Nissan, 2 weeks later, would be also a Sunday, which meant that the 14th day of Nissan, the 14th day of the month, would be Erev Pesach, the day before Pesach, would be a Shabbos. And that's significant because the second year in the desert was very different to the first year. You see, the second year in the desert, the Jews were on a whole different plane. They were now eating the manna, the man, the food that came down from heaven. They had Moshe Rabbeinu as a teacher, and they had the well of Miriam serving them water. The Jews were on a level of tzaddikim. They were completely righteous. They were enveloped by the presence of God, this cloud of glory that surrounded them. And somehow they were told, you still need to experience a jump, guys. You need to be able to have an overhaul of your perspective. So they were living a life of Shabbos, and therefore the Korban Pesach falls out on Shabbos. And the question was, so how do you offer the Korban Pesach on Shabbos? What does it even mean to offer a Korban Pesach on Shabbos? If I'm totally present and I'm experiencing the pleasure and bliss of life and I'm good, so what is there to be an overhaul? We would expect that people who have issues, people who have addictions, and people who have depressions and anxieties would need to escape their limitations. But people who are holy, what could there possibly be to escape? There's Yisachars and Zvuluns. Yisachar are people who learn Torah day and night. Zvulun are those who support the other ones. That is, Zvulun needs to experience a shift in thinking, makes sense, because he's involved in the business world. He's involved in the worldly matters, in mundanities. But that a Jew who's a Yisachar, who's engrossed in Torah, should experience a shift and should need to shift, why would that be the case? A Yisachar, a Jew who is engrossed in Torah, would appear to be perfection. So what could there be? What growth could there be expected from someone who's in a state of perfection? And by the way, it doesn't necessarily mean that some Jews are Yisachar and some Jews are Zvulun. Within each and every one of us, there's two parts to us. There's the part of us which is involved in gross, mundane events, and we are involved in worldly matters. And then we're holy and spiritual. And what we're suggesting that in a year like this, when Pesach falls out on Shabbos, our goal is to experience an overhaul of the system within Shabbos. So what's the overhaul of the system? Well, we Jews became a Jewish people. Okay, I got it. We became a Jewish people. So if I'm involved in ugly things, I get it that the thought that I'm a Jew is going to enhance my way of thinking and change me. But if, as a Jew, everything is good, if I'm feeling like I'm holy already, then, okay, so you're telling me now I'm part of the Jewish people. What is there more to grow? What growth could there be in this knowledge that we became a people? So here we are offering the Korban Pesach. This is practically the first mitzvah that Jewish people were offered, what made them into a people of God and escape Egypt, get out of Mitzrayim and become a people. This is the moment we eat the Korban Pesach. So when it applies to me today, I'm thinking about, you're telling me that through my knowledge that I am a part of God's people, that is going to allow me to escape Mitzrayim. I understand what that means, to escape a crass Mitzrayim. But what does it mean to escape? What limitations are there for a holy person? In my holy endeavors, what could there be? What change am I looking for? What we're going to take a look at today is how we can grow to a whole new perspective. Something which will shift our thinking so radically that it's actually more radical than the shift of someone who's the addict who are able to change. It's a complete different look at a very subtle nuance of what a Jew is and what it means to be a part of the Jewish people. There was a sage by the name of Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera was one of the greatest Jews, scholars, the leader of the generation. He lived in Bavel, in Babylon. And Rabbi Zera made his way from Babylon to Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. Now, when he arrived, he was cited in the Talmud Bavli, in the Babylonian Talmud, as Rab Zera. He's cited in the Jerusalem Talmud, in the Talmud Yerushalmi, as Rab Zeira. But there was a time when he arrived in the land of Israel. Now, the way of thinking of Babylon and Israel was very different. Talmud Bavli and Talmud Yerushalmi, if you study them, are very different. The Bavli is much more into arguments. The Yerushalmi is much more straightforward. So Rab Zera moved from Bavel to the land of Israel. And when he arrived, he couldn't understand what they were talking about. He was trying to learn, couldn't learn. The reason was because his modus operandi, his way of thinking, was completely different. So he didn't know how to shift his thinking from Babylonian to Jerusalem mode. Sat in the class, in the lectures, and couldn't understand. So he went home and he davened. Didn't just daven, he fasted. Some say 40 fasts, and some say 100 fasts. And his goal was lishkoyach Talmud Bavli, to forget the Babylonian Talmud, not the actual learning, but rather the style, the way he was used to, the narrative of how he would tell himself a story. He switched from one to the other. Here is a man who was a scholar, a tzaddik, a holy man, and he was switching mode completely, and he fasted 40 or 100 fasts in order to get from one level to the next. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for a transition that's going to take place. The things that we know, the Judaism that we know, not the things that we do that are negative, the things that we do that are divine and holy. When Pesach falls out on Shabbos, it calls upon us, it beckons us to look at life, at Judaism, at God, in a whole new light. To see things in a perspective we never saw before. In order to do that, we're going to study some Torah. Let's study and understand a little bit, delve into what is this Korban Pesach we offer on Shabbos. Let's go into the halacha behind it. Now, there's an interesting Gemara in Tractate Pesachim. The Gemara describes there was a situation that took place once. Erev Pesach falls out on Shabbos, and they don't know what to do because you have to offer the korban and slaughter the animal on Shabbos. And the leaders of the people were known as Bnei Beseira. It was a family, the sons of Beseira. They were wondering, what do we do? What do we do? Pesach needs to be offered, the korban needs to be offered, but it's Shabbos. Do you offer the korban on Shabbos or not? So they're wondering what to do. Because slaughtering an animal is forbidden on Shabbos. Slaughtering an animal means to shed blood. And you can't do that on Shabbos. But in the Beis HaMikdash, you were able to do that. So they didn't know, could they do it or not? Now, at the heart of the question was, in the Beis HaMikdash, they would offer korbanos, they would offer sacrifices, many sacrifices. They offer them on Shabbos. But only communal sacrifices could be offered on Shabbos. Individual sacrifices could not be offered on Shabbos. If an individual wants to offer a korban, he may only do so on a weekday. Was the Korban Pesach to be regarded as a communal sacrifice or as an individual sacrifice? On the one hand, the Korban Pesach has elements of community in it because all the Jews together offer a Korban Pesach. An individual korban would be similar to if a person wants to offer, he has something great happen to him, and he has to offer a korban toida because he's thanking God for events where you have to thank God for. Or he did something wrong, wants to offer a korban chatzas. So as an individual, he's coming into the Beis HaMikdash and is offering a korban. But then there's communal sacrifices that we offer, like on a holiday, where all Jews offer the same korban. So Korban Pesach has a dichotomy. On the one hand, it's a communal korban in the sense that all Jews come together into the Beis HaMikdash in the same few hours on the day before Pesach, and they slaughter the korban and they all eat it together. On the other hand, each one then goes home to his own house, unlike any other korban, and eats it by himself in his house. The other korbanos were either devoured by the Mizbeach itself, would consume them, the altar, or the Kohanim would eat them, or some Jews, but you couldn't go to your own house and eat it. Korban Pesach is different. Each Jew ate this korban in his own house individually. So it has an element of individuality, of customization, and you had to prepare yourself before. You couldn't just eat the korban. Each one had to have, as we noted, a kazais, so you had to sign up before, so you should be able to eat your korban. And if you didn't sign up, you couldn't, if to the family you were going to, you couldn't eat the korban. So every individual is important over here, on the one hand. On the other hand, it is a communal sacrifice. So they didn't know, as a communal sacrifice, should it push aside Shabbos, and therefore you can slaughter the korban even on Shabbos, or should we say, no, you can't offer this korban? Looking around, what do we paskin? What verdict do we reach? They found an old man by the name of Hillel. Hillel was, and this is long before Abzera, from before, Hillel was a man who, Olami Bavel, he came from Babylon also, and he was an obscure personality. Nobody knew who he was. Hillel Paskin, he ruled, and he said, V'chi Pesach echad yesh lanu bashana. Do we only have one Korban Pesach a year? We have more than 200 Pesachim a year. What he meant was that every Shabbat we offer, every day, you offer a Korban Tamid in the morning and a Korban Tamid in the afternoon. On Shabbos, it would be forbidden to offer those Korbanos because it's Shabbos. So what do? Or do you offer them or not? Yet we know in the Beis HaMikdash they would offer those communal Korbanos. So that's 50-something Shabbosim a year. It's about 100 and change Korbanos, because it's 2 every Shabbos. Add to that the Korban Musaf, which was offered every Shabbat. That's another 50-something. And add the holidays where they would offer Korbanos also. So he says, you see, that we do offer Korbanos, communal Korbanos on Shabbos. And they accepted this verdict of ruling. Essentially, Hillel ruled that the Korban Pesach was a communal Korban, and therefore as such would be able to be offered. So let's not get into the actual discussion yet. Before we get into the discussion, the question is, what does that mean? That there was this argument and they didn't know whether the Korban Pesach should be offered on Shabbos or not. You know, this year, if you look back, the last time there was a Korban Pesach was 13 years ago. Granted, 13 years is a substantial amount of time, enough time for a person to forget what we did those 13 years ago. But I guarantee you that someone remembers what we did 13 years ago and someone wrote it down. Someone took some pictures. Was there WhatsApp 13 years ago? Someone took pictures way back then, and someone's going to remember. What does that mean when it came to the Korban Pesach? Nobody remembered, did you offer a Korban on Shabbos or not? That should be pretty clear. Bnei Beseira seemed to be discovering America. They were saying, do you offer a Korban on Shabbos or not? It should be very clear whether you offer a Korban on Shabbos or not by merely checking up, what did we do last time? And this was a history of what we did all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu. Similar to the question of, there's different things that we do. Korban Pesach, at least every falling out on Shabbos, is not an annual event. You know, there's certain things that we do that are even constant, and yet there's an argument as to how we do it. For example, how you put on tefillin. There's an argument between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam as to how you put on tefillin, the order of the parshias. That's why many Jews put on Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. There's a whole question how you put on Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. But what do you mean there was an argument? So the generation before Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, who lived only 1,000 years ago, how did they put on tefillin? And shouldn't we just check the previous generation and see what did they do? It's a question about blowing shofar. When we blow shofar, you blow, it says, the Torah says to blow a tekiah, and then trua, and then tekiah. The question is, we don't know what a trua is. Is a trua, or is a trua, or is it both? So what do? We don't know. So we blow all of them. We blow shvarim trua, then shvarim, then trua. We blow all of them because we're not sure. But surely you should have remembered from the year before what they did. There's an argument about tzitzis between Shammai and Hillel, how many strings should be in a tzitzis. These are all arguments that should have been so clear and obvious, and yet for some reason became obscure. And there's many different attempts at interpreting what exactly transpired over here. Why don't we know? So, you know, by the Korban Pesach, actually, there's for that, the Yerushalmi says that it was a miracle. It's just a miracle that happened because we wanted Hillel to become, God wanted Hillel to become the leader of the generation, the prince. They elected him president afterwards, a Nasi. So in order to have him, they forgot. Very difficult, though, to say they would forget an halacha which was so clear, only because in order for Hillel to remember, like everybody forgot. The Tziyun the Nefesh Chaya, the Tzlach, authored by the Noida Yehuda. He has a different answer. Parenthetically, the Noida Yehuda, that is, Noida Yehuda was Rabbi Yecheskel Landa. He lived, 300 years ago in Prague. I once visited Prague. Fascinating to see his matzeva, his tombstone. So on his tombstone, there's one tombstone and another one, and at the head and the end of the cave or of the grave. And there it says, here lies the great, wonderful, awesome, amazing, incredible tzaddik, the Rabban Shil, leader of all generation. And there's like a 20-line praise of him. And then it says, and he asked that we should only say, here lies Yechezkel Landau. And therefore we're going to say, here lies Yechezkel Landau. And then on the other side, it says, here lies Yechezkel Landau of Prague. So he wanted that nobody should write any praise about him, but they didn't want to do that. So they wrote that he said that nobody should write any praise about him. So the Noda Yehuda wrote a sefer called the Tzlach, Tzil Nefesh Chaya. And there he explains, he says, you know what the reason why Hillel forgot? Why Bnei Beseira forgot and why Hillel had to remember? He says they didn't actually forget the halacha of whether you're supposed to offer a korban or not. But they were wondering a few weeks before Pesach, they were wondering. In those days they were able to change the calendar a little bit because the calendar wasn't fixed. Today we have a calendar that's fixed. In those days the calendar wasn't fixed. So what you were able to do was make a determination on what the calendar should look like by making either one day of Rosh Chodesh or 2 days of Rosh Chodesh. So they actually were able to change the day that Pesach would come out by changing the day of Rosh Chodesh. And the question is, should we move Pesach that it shouldn't fall out on a Sunday, that the day before Pesach shouldn't be a Shabbos, that we shouldn't have to offer a korban in the Beis HaMikdash or not? And therefore, there wasn't a question of if Pesach falls out on Shabbos, for sure you offer the korban. For sure you sacrifice on Shabbat, like we did last time. But do we have to push it away or not? That answer too is very difficult to accept, because take a look what they did last time, and the time before, and the time before. Surely you should know what they did. Did they push aside? Did they make Rosh Chodesh 1 day or 2 days to change the day Erev Pesach would fall about, or did they not? And if they didn't, that means that you shouldn't change the day. So we're remaining with a question over here, which is not just applicable to the case of Korban Pesach. It's really Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam Tefillah, the tzitzis in the argument of Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, and the Shavarim in the Shavarim Trua in the blowing of the shofar. What are these arguments? And almost like built into Judaism. So there was once a question in shul. There was every Shabbos in shul there's a prayer, there's a tefillah that we say called Ava Rachamim. Now Ava Rachamim you only say when there's no tachanun. So if Shabbos that day were a weekday, if you look, would you say tachanun that day? If you would, then you do say Ava Rachamim. And if you don't, then you don't say Ava Rachamim. That prayer on Shabbos morning. So like this month is a month of Nissan, we don't say tachanun, so you don't say Ava Rachamim. So anyway, in this one shul, there was an argument because it was Yom Tov. Yom Tov you never say tachanun, so you never say Ava Rachamim. But there's an exception. When Yom Tov, some Yom Tovim, a few times a year, we say Yizkor. When you say Yizkor, you're remembering the deceased. So at the same time you say Ava Rachamim. Ava Rachamim remembers all those Jews who died al Kiddush Hashem, who died sanctifying the name of God. We don't usually want to remember on a Shabbos or Yom Tov. If there's no tachanun, we don't say it. But what do? When you say Yizkor, so the people who say Yizkor, they definitely say Ava Rachamim. The other people come back into shul, should they say Ava Rachamim or not? So in one shul there was a big debate going on. Everyone went out of shul for Yizkor. The guys inside said Ava Rachamim. When the people came back into shul, they were saying Ava Rachamim. So the people were wondering, do we say Ava Rachamim or not? And they decided to ask the elder of the shul, this very old man who definitely remembered what the custom in this shul was. What do? Do we say Ava Rachamim in such a time or not? And the guy's like racking his brain. He's like an old man. He's trying to remember, what did they do? Do we say Ava Rachamim here or not? And he's trying to go back and remember. And meantime, the people in front of the bima are bickering, fighting. Should they go? And the argument became a heated debate, and they're fighting with each other. And there's this whole shul, two sides of the shul, screaming at each other. Do we say Ava Rachamim? Do we not? What's the custom over here? And the old man pipes up and he says, I remember what the custom of the shul is. That is the custom of the shul. The fighting, the arguing over whether we say Ava Rachamim or not. That is the argument. You see, some things in Judaism were designed to be argued on. Some things were ruled very clear, and some things were designed to be argued on. So actually what happened was, Moshe himself, we don't know whether he put on Rashi or Rabbeinu Tam. We don't know how he blew the shofar. Did he blow it true this way or that way? But regardless of how he blew, right after Moshe Rabbeinu, the halachas were forgotten. There were many halachas, the Gemara tells us, that were forgotten. One of the halachas that was forgotten was, how do you put on tefillin? Rashi or Rabbeinu Tam. How do you blow a shofar? What's the tzitzis? How do you make it? And those halachas remained obscure. And it's not that they were ever adjudicated and ruled, it's that every time that comes about, there was a debate about it. So it was built in as a debate. An example of that is today Ashkenazim and Sephardim. So there's two different types of Jews. And Ashkenazim and Sephardim in general, Ashkenazim, for example, come Pesach, won't touch rice. And rice is kitnius. And if you touch rice, there's a cherem, there's this excommunication. It's forbidden in any way to eat rice. And yet for Sephardim, it's almost like a mitzvah to have rice, to prove that we allow to have rice. That the Ashkenazim don't know what they're talking about. So who's right? Both are right. If you're Ashkenazi, you may not eat rice. If you're Sephardi, you may eat rice on Pesach. And that's the way Judaism is. It's obscure, it's designed in certain things that there's some types of Jews who are meant this way and some types who are meant that way. When it came to the laws of how to put on tefillin, there was always this debate going on as to how to put on tefillin and how to blow the shofar and how to put on tzitzis and whether you offer the korban on Shabbos or not. So the debate comes about again when it came to Bnei B'Seir. They knew what happened last time, but they said, let's debate it again, because every time it happens, we want to rule. What do we understand this halacha? Every time Pesach comes about, the question is, I need to rule again if I understand this halacha or not. And it's interesting that years after Hillel HaZaken already ruled that you do offer the korban on Shabbos, well, generations later, when we find in the Mechilta an argument that takes place between Rabbi Yeshaya and Rabbi Yonatan. Rabbi Yeshaya and Rabbi Yonasan had an argument. The argument was, as you would expect, whether you offer the Korban Pesach on Shabbos or not. So Rabbi Yeshaya says, yes you do. Rabbi Yonatan says, no you don't. Now we already saw, what's the subject matter? What's the argument between them? But first, how could they argue if it was already resolved by Hillel? The answer is, even once it was resolved, every time Pesach falls out on Shabbos, it needs to be adjudicated again from new. You need to, in this year, understand the two sides of it and reach a verdict in that generation. So, Rabbi Yeshaya and Rabbi Yonasan are interesting because to understand what they were arguing about, we take a zoom out of Rabbi Yeshaya and Rabbi Yonasan in the entire Shas. Now there's what's called in Shas, let's delve a little bit into some Gemara, deep Gemara. There's what's called Leshitasam. Leshitasam means that you have a line of thinking. So Rabbi Yeshaya has one way of thinking, and Rabbi Yonasan has another way of thinking. Rabbi Yeshaya and Rabbi Yonasan argue many places in the entire Shas. And if you look carefully, you'll discover that every single time they argue, they're actually having the same argument. And I won't go into all the details now of the tzricha, of why you need each argument, but let's just take the overview of what is the argument in the entire Shas between Rabbi Yeshaya and Rabbi Yonatan. Rabbi Yeshaya holds that you always go by the community. It always is the tzibur. You look at things communally. And Rabbi Yonatan says you look at the individual. That's the argument between them in the entire Shas. Here's some examples. The Torah says that that if a person steals and he stole something and then he denied that he stole it, so he has to pay an extra 1/5, a chomesh. How much is a chomesh? How much is a fifth? So I don't know. I would think 100. If you stole $100 and you denied it, you got to pay back an extra fifth. So you got to pay $20. That's a fifth. And yet the halacha is that you got to pay. Rabbi Yeshaya says 125, and you're like, but 25 is a quarter, not a fifth. So Rabbi Yonatan says, yep, $20. So that's 1/5, 20%. Rabbi Yeshaya says you're misunderstanding what a fifth is. What you want to do is take a fifth, take the actual principal, the $100, add to that a fifth, which means 25, which is a quarter, because now you're going to take a fifth of that. So I'm going to take 125 because a fifth of 125 is 25. Rabbi Yonatan says, no, 100, take a fifth of that, and then put 120. You see how Rabbi Yonatan looks at the 100 separately and the chomesh separately, and then he puts, so it's 120. Rabbi Yeshaya looks at both together, because he's always going to look at the bird's eye view. 100 plus the 25, now take a fifth. Another argument is, if a person curses, God forbid, his father or his mother. So the din is, you're not allowed to curse your father and mother, and there's a terrible punishment if one does. But what happens if a person curses either his father or his mother, only one of them? Must he curse both of them, or even only one of them? question at hand is, because in Torah it says, Ish imoy ve'aviv tiro, you should fear your father and your mother. It doesn't say your father or your mother, it doesn't say your father and your mother together, it says your father or your mother. So Rabbi Shai and Rabbi Yonasan have an argument as to whether each one is on his own, or they're both together. And a different argument is, the blood on Yom Kippur, they were sprinkling blood of a bull, a par, and a soy, and a goat. Doesn't mean you got to put them together, the blood of the bull and the goat together, or each one separately. Again, Rabbi Yishai looks at things together. Rabbi Yonatan says each one individually. And there's many different examples of this, but this is the argument also when it comes to the Korban Pesach. The question is the Korban Pesach a communal korban, a communal sacrifice, and that's because all Jews are offering it together, or is it something individual? Because every individual is separate and unique in this korban. And which one is it? Now, it's both. But Rabbi Shaya says the main thrust is the tzibur, is the community. And therefore, Korban Pesach may be offered on Shabbos. Rabbi Yonatan says, no, the main thrust is the yochid, the individual. And therefore, you may not offer it on Shabbos. So how do we resolve? Hillel HaZaken once said, Hillel HaZaken had two statements that he made that appear to be contradictory. On the one hand, Hillel said, Im ani kan hakol kan. If I am here, everything is here. This is Hillel, who's the Gemara tells us clearly, is the humblest of all men. And Hillel says, if I'm here, everything is here. I'm it. I'm the be-all and end-all of everything. Conversely, the same Hillel says, K'shani li'atzmi mo'ani. If I am for myself, if I don't have the congregation with me, then what am I? And that expresses the depth of a human being's quest. Because we're all social beings, especially this time, during this season about social distancing lately. We know that we humans we need other people. We want to be together. We want to be part of a community. And yet there's something special and unique about each individual. Im ani kan hakol kan. And at the heart of the debate of the Korban Pesach on Shabbos, whether it's a communal korban or whether it's a personal korban, is the question of how we view the individual Jew. What do we look at as individual Jew? Typically, we tend to look at a Jew as part of the Jewish people. It's very special to be part of the Jewish people. And every single Jew is integral to the Jewish people. There are 600,000 letters in the Torah. And Yisroel, it says, is an acronym for Yisrael. Yesh shishim ribo otiyot laTorah. There's 600,000 letters in the Torah. And if one letter, one single solitary letter, is missing a little tiny bit of ink, the entire Torah can be puzzled. One Jew is missing and the entire Torah is missing. And when you see one Jew, you look at him, you realize the power of one Jew. And you say, wow, this individual is incredible. But you know why he's incredible? He's incredible because he's special to the entire community. The entire community needs you. Judaism is not the same without you. And we all need you. Now look at the individual as special and unique. You know, I was once, a while back, probably a couple of years ago by now, I was driving my car, going to the oil, the Lubavitcher Rebbe's resting place. And on the way, somebody called me up, and the guy was in real gehaktitzaris. He was in big problems. And I was sitting on the phone, and you know how depressing it is when a guy's pouring out his heart. And I'm wondering, I don't have the money to help him. He needed money. And I don't have the ability to help him. And I listened to him the whole way, and I was commiserating with him. I didn't know what to do. Now, this guy had joined we have a program for single-parent kids called My Extended Family. And this guy was in the program. And I just didn't know what to do. I finished the conversation with him. I went into the oil, davened, did my thing. I came out of the oil, and I was driving back, and the whole time I'm wondering, what do I do? How do I help this guy? And somehow the prayer was answered. It was incredible. I got a call out of the blue from a guy who I never met. I met another guy who was connected to this guy, but this guy himself I never met ever before. And the guy called me up, out of the blue, and he says, "Hi, my name is this and this. I'm connected to this guy. He told me to call you. I heard you have a program where you help out single-parent kids." He says, "Tell me something. I have a certain program I want to do. I want to give money every month to families who need it. I want to give to families who are suffering and struggling, and I want to give them cash. And I want to make sure it goes to the right place. So I'm not sure how to work it, but when they need heating and food and whatever else they need, but something is going to really place them on their feet. Obviously, we don't have unlimited cash, but I want you to figure it out for the families in your program. Please figure it out. Give me every month a report, and that's it." He said, "I'm going to give you every month $10,000. 10 grand. Can you use it?" I said, "Hey." I said, "You know what? It's a relief to me and to the people I work with, because if we can help people and actually help with some cash and put the money where your mouth is, it's a lot better than anything else. And yes, I'm taking it." And straight away I called the other guy and I said, "I got some money for you." That guy has been giving us money, $10,000, together with his friend, for the past couple of years, religiously every single month. And I cannot tell you how many families have been helped in our program. Families in our program it's meant for have been helped ever since then. Really, truly incredible. So I asked the guy, I said, "What's up with this? You called me out of the blue? It's so difficult to fundraise. You're calling me out of the blue and you're just throwing all this money. What's the story?" The guy tells me, "Let me tell you what happened." He says, "I grew up in a single parent home. My father I didn't have a relationship with. My mother raised us. We were a few kids. She raised us all. And she was a heroine. She was incredible. She had nothing. And she fought like a lioness to make sure that we had what we needed to live. And I remember her, especially before Yom Tov. I remember her as the Yom Tov came along. She would hit the phones and she would call one after another. She never took no for an answer. And she got a few dollars from this guy and a few dollars from that guy and a couple from this guy. And then I remember that first time when one guy came along and he threw us a huge amount. I don't know what the amount was. I was a little kid. Maybe it was $500. But the guy threw a huge amount at us. And I remember and I said to myself, wow, this person has made our Yom Tov, has changed my mother, has changed my life, has changed my siblings' life. And I decided right there and then that I am going to grow up and I'm going to help a lot of other kids. He says, and that was my passion. And I grew up and God has put me in a position, thank God, that I have so much money and I don't know what to do with it. Thank God. And he says, and I'm putting my money where my mouth is. And I'm here to help and to help all those people in the same position as I was in. I was blown away. I said, you know what? Some guy out there who put a few $100, who knows, 20, 30, 40 years ago, put that money to some mother, is now, he has the chus, the privilege of so many families of 10 grand a month being given to all these families today. Because one Jew cared about another Jew. And he didn't say, yeah, it's just one Jew. He said, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. And he cared. Each individual is special and unique. That's how we look at things generally. But that doesn't help us offer a Korban Pesach on Shabbos. Because when Erev Pesach falls out on Shabbos, you got a question, is the Pesach communal or not? What you're saying is every Jew is important in context of the community. If it's the community, I get it. But if it's the individual, then he cannot offer a Korban on Shabbos. And so we need a new look. In order to connect Rabbi Yeshaya and Rabbi Yonasan, one looks at the individual and the other one looks at the community. But when we analyze carefully, we see that the power of one Jew is not that he's greater, but great because he's part of the community. The power of one Jew is in his own special uniqueness. He's one Jew. Not because he's part of the Jewish people. The Jewish people are amazing. The Jewish people are unbelievable. And that one Jew is absolutely, he's part of the Jewish people. He's a great grandson. He's a son of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. He deserves so much. But there's much more to a Jew. Far, far more to a Jew. You know, when you have a child, we have a bunch of children, you kind of like make this cookie cutter definition of what the family is. And you, whether you like it or not, you kind of like mold the kids. You've got to fit into this mold. And one kid's a little bit off. And you say, yeah, but you're still on, and you get them to be molded in the right direction. That's how we generally look at children. That's not called individual. You know what individual means? Individual is when each and every individual is not important because of his contribution to the Klal Yisrael, to the generality of Jews. What it means to become a part of the Jewish people is Jewish people one with God. Not the Jewish people, the Jewish person. Each and every individual is so unique, so special, not because of his connection to the rest of the people. You don't look at that child in your family and say, wow, you're part of you. You give me so much nachas because you're part of this family. When you have one child, you focus on that child and you say, here's the way it is. You know, the Baal Shem Tov says that a neshama comes down to this world for 70, 80 years to do a favor to one Jew one time. I have the ability to do a favor to you now. If you're my child, that's amazing, that's awesome. If you're not my child, if you're just another Jew, I look at you and I say, this Jew is not part of the whole Klal Yisrael. He himself is the goal. Sure, he's part of the Klal Yisrael. Absolutely, that's amazing. But you yourself are special because you are unique. You are a community. It's not that you need to rationalize your existence as part of the Jewish people. If I look at a child and I say, this Jew, this child, he's worth my whole life is worth it just to be able to reach this child. One favor to one Jew, one time, my child, not my child. That's the uniqueness and specialty. When I look at myself in that kind of light, I start realizing, wow, it's not that there was some holy people, there were Rashis and Rabbeinu Tams and Rambams, and there were the Vilna Goins and the Yehudas, and there were the Baal Shem Tovs and the Bnei Yissaschars and all these holy people that existed in all time. No. They were great, they were amazing. But Judaism is me. Judaism is you. Judaism is that you became a nation on this day. When God went into Mitzrayim and goes into Mitzrayim every year, he didn't take the Jewish people out only, he took you as an individual out. Not you who lived once, you who lives today were taken out. And God takes you out. That realization itself is what extracts us from Mitzrayim. Every Jew is a world on his or her own. As I was learning this a couple of weeks ago, so something fascinating happened. I'm learning this whole discussion. I'm thinking about how amazing a Jew is. And then I get this call. A shaila. A shaila came from a guy. Now, the guy calls like this. He calls up and he says that his wife is ill. His wife has a terrible, terrible illness. And it happened during pregnancy. And he says to me, what do I do? My wife, she literally can't breathe. And she's suffering so much. He says, but I want to keep the laws of Nida. And the laws of Nida are that you're not allowed to touch your wife in those times. But she's ill. Am I allowed to touch her? Am I allowed to help her out or not? I'm listening to his question. And I'm thinking of the answer. I'm looking it up. And then I'm wondering to myself, and I remember that, when you go to rabbinate school, they teach you in Smicha, that when you paskin, when you reach a verdict on a shaila, when someone comes to you with a question, don't just answer the question, ask the question. And the example pointed out is that there was a Jew who came to the rabbi and he says, Rabbi, are you allowed to have 4 kaises, the 4 cups, on the Seder night? Can I have milk? Is it okay? Instead of wine. I don't have money for wine. And the rabbi says, my son, I'm going to send you over the wine. Okay? Problem will be solved. I'll send you over 4 cups of wine. Don't worry, you'll have everything you need. And the Rav calls over his shamish, his assistant, and he says, go over and bring them wine, meat, and some matzah, and everything else they need. And the guy said, but he only asked for wine. He says, no, 1 second. If he's having 4 cups of milk, he clearly doesn't have meat either. You can't have meat and milk. And if he doesn't have meat, he probably doesn't have a whole bunch of the other necessities. You have to realize when a person asks what exactly he is asking, then address the questioner. And as this guy, I must admit, not always would I think about it. Sometimes the guy would ask me a question, I'll just answer the question, and refuah shalema, you should have a speedy recovery, and that's it. But I'm thinking that I was given this guy's calling me up, and I was given the ability to help. So maybe I should be asking the next question, which is, hey, how are you managing? And as he's talking, I suddenly realized, oh my gosh, I realized who this guy is. And I realized how phenomenal it was that he's actually calling about a shaila. Because I got to tell you the truth. I met this guy once before. I met him in some shul. I met him once. Only one time. But I recognized his voice so clearly because I had that whole discussion with him then. And the guy came to shul on Shabbos morning. And he was zoomed out. You know what I mean, zoomed out? When a person goes on Zoom, no, I'm not doing that now, but when you go on Zoom, like, you don't need to have long pants. So, okay, you can have short pants. And, you wear shorts, and then you wear a suit on top. So this guy came to shul wearing a suit and shorts. I found that to be a little bit interesting. And then I saw the guy, he was like a JFK Jew, just for Kiddush. He comes in, he clearly didn't appreciate the whole Judaism. He was very angry on some level. I don't know, I didn't get into the whole discussion. And he wanted the chevra to be around the club, but the Kiddush club, but he didn't want much about the davening, or so I thought at least. And here he was asking me a question, his wife is so ill. And it dawned on me that this guy was asking a deep question, and he was looking to better himself. And I said to him, how are you managing? What's going on? How are you surviving? Like, you have a couple kids at home, right? You have 4 kids at home? What are you doing? He says, laundry's piled up, things are crazy, I don't know what to do. I can't manage without my wife, but yeah. God's going to help. And I said, you mind if I post on my status if someone can get help, cleaning lady and other stuff for you? He says, I'm desperate, go ahead. So I posted on my status. Status is amazing, by the way. WhatsApp status. Incredible how you can reach Jews, and there's help in no time at all. It took a few minutes. I got him a little bit, another one. Then I got him a cleaning lady, someone arranged. I just got people just asking. They just want to help all the time. Incredible. So beautiful to be part of this community. And then one guy calls me up. And he says, I want to give the guy money. So he sent him money. But then we were discussing, and he says, I don't know what's going on with this guy. He says, now, this guy who called me up, I never met this guy either. This guy, I do meet some people, just this guy and the other guy I didn't meet. So, this guy, how did I know him? Because a few weeks ago we had a fundraiser for our My Extended Family program, and one of the big brothers who has this kid, he handles, and he's a big brother too. So that big brother posted on his status. Now most times a big brother's going to get $100, $50, little donations. Someone out of the blue, anonymous, donates $5,000. I tracked down this anonymous, found him, and I called him up and said, $5,000 you donated without even being asked? He says, yep, I grew up in a single parent home. I know what it's like. I know the pain. I've always wanted to make this kind of organization my entire life. I see it's being done. I'm thinking this amazing. So I made up with this guy we're going to meet, but the past few weeks we haven't met yet. But now he's in my phone, so he saw my status. And he calls me up, he says, I thought you deal with single parent kids. I said, I do, but whatever, this guy's, what should I do? I helped him out. He says, could you find out what sickness he has, what's going on? I found out exactly what the name of the illness was, and I told this guy. Turns out, it's a 1 in a million chance of getting this. It comes to a woman when she's pregnant. 1 in a million chance of getting this illness. And this guy, he got this 1 in a million. His wife. The guy listens and says, what was it exactly you said? He says, 1 in a million chance of getting it? Because you know something? My wife had the exact same thing a bunch of years ago. The exact same illness. And we lost that baby, Shem Yishmo. And he says, and then I want you to know we had another baby. She's alive and well, and it's many years later. I said, wow, that's amazing. I put them both together. So this guy called the other guy. He gave him so much chizuk, he strengthened him so much. The guy needed to hear this so badly. Not only did he give him some money that he needed to get through this difficult time in his life before he can get back on, but he told him, he says, look, I was also on the receiving end, and now I'm on the giving end. And there's a way to survive this and a way to get through this. And I marveled. I called the guy up. I said, do you realize how incredible, what divine providence that is? What are the chances that a 1 in a million illness, that this guy has it and you have it, and I just met you, I didn't even meet you, and on my status, and you reach it? Because when you look at a Jew, and you look deep into his eyes, and you don't think about anyone or anything else, you don't even look at him, not just that you're special, not just that you're special as part of the Jewish people. You look at the Jew and you say, I'm on Shabbos mode. What's Shabbos mode? Nothing else exists. My dear Yidale, there's you and there's me. You're the most special person in the entire world. And for me to be able to help you and to serve you is the greatest purpose of my entire life. It's the greatest privilege. When I look at you that way, not as part of the Jewish people, not as your grandparents and your great-grandparents and all the people who had self-sacrificed before you, but rather as you, just for you. God has a soul vested in you. And when God makes the Jewish people on Pesach and He takes us out of Mitzrayim, that's you, my friend. The energy that's transmitted between one who thinks that way and the other one who receives is so powerful and so incredible that you can reach any Jew that way. You can change the life of your child. You can change the life of a fellow Jew. You can change the life of yourself. The guy was angry at God. I hope I'm not going to speak for him. But I think that the fact that he's calling with a question, and the fact that he's got this energy of realizing, how could he not? That so many Jews are just jumping to help him. You have a problem? We're jumping to help you. That's Jews caring. El pleverus unum. All for one. Or genuinely for one. If you're genuinely for one, that one is exalted so much. You want to change the life of your child? Tell the child nothing else exists besides you. If you got 2 children, tell it to each one. It's possible to tell it to each one. And when I look at that child differently, I look at myself differently. I escape my Mitzrayim. Rabbi Shaya says, you need a communal. Pesach needs to be a communal korban. Rabbi Yonasan, and then we can push aside Shabbos. Rabbi Yonasan says it's private. But it's really both true. You know why you're able to offer Korban Pesach on Shabbos? Because each individual Jew is the community. But that's not easy to accept. And so every single time Pesach falls out on a Shabbos, the Erev Pesach falls out on Shabbos, and we've got to bring that Korban on Shabbos. And Shabbos, I'm fully present, I'm ready, I'm seeing. Okay, I got it. And Shabbos falls out on Pesach, and I say, but what is that one single solitary Jew? I look at that Jew and I say, let's jump over all my inhibitions, all my thoughts, everything I ever believed in. I'm going to focus on nothing but you. And the one single individual is an entire community. And so yes, it is possible to offer a korban on Shabbos, Korban Pesach, but it's such a chidush, it's such an innovation that every single time Pesach falls out on Erev Shabbos, we question it again and again, and every single time we're called upon Paskin to reach the verdict again. Why? Because every generation the Jews are different. The Jews of our generation, of our time, need to be thought of differently to the ones that were 13 years ago and the last time Pesach fell on Erev Shabbos. And every time I'm going to be able to see the Jews around me and the Jew that's me, and to say, escape your Mitzrayim. You're not locked into the story that the rest of the world is into. You're special, you're unique. And if I'm going to transmit that energy to you, then you as an individual are going to become a community. And when you're a community, communities can bring the korban on Shabbos. And so I can paskin at this Pesach, we can offer a korban on Shabbos. And if we can truly paskin that, if we can truly in our mind look at the Jew next to you, just focus. This is an actual avodah of Pesach. It's my ability to look at the Jew and to say, if I'm here, everything is here, even though I need the community. If this Jew's here, everything is here. This Jew, this person, is a world on his own. And if I can view it that way, then I can paskin, I can reach a verdict that this Shabbos, this Erev Pesach, we can offer a korban. And God can allow us to bring that Korban Pesach on the Shabbos. And if God forbid we find ourselves in Golus, in exile on Shabbos, then that is our ability to transform the power of one Jew and to say, God, you're allowed to offer a korban on Shabbos, even if we're in Golus, even if we're in exile. It's halachically permissible. Get us out of Golus. Take this nation, take this one Jew. Every Jew is special, no matter what circumstances he finds himself. And this very thought itself is what extracts him from Golus and brings him to Geula. Wishing you all a wonderful festival of true freedom. Chag Kasher V'Sameach.